In the last section, we looked at the Redux API without any React. Now we'll see how to integrate Redux into a React application. So our objectives will be to describe React Redux, use the provider component to share a store, and use connect to map state to props and map dispatch to props. We'll see what that means when we get to it. So React Redux is a library that facilitates integrating React with Redux. It exposes a provider component and a connect function, which we'll use to hook Redux up to React. And provider, along with connect, handles setting up listeners and passing state to components. So to install React Redux, it's just npm install -- save React Redux. And don't forget, you also need Redux installed. So this is an example of setting up React Redux with a React app. Very similar to React Router, you're going to wrap your top-level app component in a provider. And then you'll want to create a store, just like we saw before using create store, and pass in a root reducer. And then that store will be a prop to your provider. Now notice here, we're importing create store from Redux, so we don't have to say redux.createStore anymore. We can just use the create store function directly. And our root reducer is coming in from a reducers file. Once we've set up our store, we need a way of getting the state out of the store and into our components. So in this example, I have a very simple component called bold name. It takes in a name as a prop and just puts strong tags around it. Assuming I have a key of name in my state, in order to pass that into my component as a prop, I need to implement this map state to props function. And the parameter to that function is the entire state of your application. And what you return is the piece of state that just this component cares about. So there could be hundreds of keys in this state object, but the only one I care about for this component is name. So I'm going to pass name in as a prop, and the value of name will be state.name. Now in order to hook that up to your component, you will export default not just bold name, but the connect function, which first takes map state to props as a parameter, and then returns a new function. And then with that new function, you'll pass in your component. So this is what you'll typically see in React. Now in the last example, we saw a component that needed some state out of the store. But what about a component that needs to dispatch an action? Well, that's what the second parameter of connect is for, and the function name is typically map dispatch to props. So this function gets two parameters, dispatch and the props of that component. And it returns an object. The keys of the object are what props you want to pass to the component, and the values are functions. The function typically invokes dispatch with an action. So inside of this component, whenever I do an onClick, I'll use the delete name prop, which is a function that dispatches an action to delete that name. So this is what it looks like using both components together. Since we already exported bold name and delete name with connect, we don't need to do connect here. And the two components are already hooked up to state and to dispatch, so we don't need to add any additional props. So this will render a button that I can use to delete the name and the name itself. Now it's your turn. Next up, we're going to work on an exercise to use Redux.